What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And today is no exception. Lori Vallow Daybell was found guilty on all charges of conspiracy to commit murder as well as murder and fraud. All those charges that she faced, she was convicted on. She now sits in the Madison County, Idaho jail awaiting sentencing, all but certain to spend the rest of her life behind bars, but her lawyers are already finagling behind the scenes. The Sordid Saga is far from over for both she and Chad Daybell, and we'll discuss why during this episode. Best guests. You know her well. Gigi McKelvey is host of the popular true crime podcast, Pretty Lies Alibis. She spent 6 weeks in Boise, Idaho, covering the Lori Vallow Daybell trial for Law Crime and NewsNation. And she's produced over 50 podcasts or so and counting and growing now on the Lori Vallow Daybell story for her podcast, Pretty Lies Alibis. We were supposed to have the guy that Ryan Phillippe, if I'm even saying that right. And I saw all the women were excited. They thought the movie star was going to be on tonight. But he played Lance Leising from the FBI. But last minute, Lance had a conflict. But filling in and stepping in just as good, if not better, Robin Dreek. He is a best-selling author, a professional speaker, a trainer, executive coach, podcast host, Marine Corps officer, and retired FBI special agent. He was chief of the Counterintelligence Behavior Analysis Program. One of his many jobs was recruiting spies. How about that? He is the author of The Code of Trust, and It's Not All About Me. Last but not least, Sky Lazaro, coming to us from Salt Lake City. She's an experienced corporate and criminal defense attorney. She's defended a broad range of criminal cases, including domestic violence, allegations, sex crimes, drug crimes, property crimes, DUI, white-collar crimes. The list goes on and on. But you might know her best right now. She represents Corey Richins. If that name sounds familiar, she is the Utah mom accused of poisoning her husband with 5 times the lethal amount of fentanyl and then writing a children's grief book about the experience. So everyone is here and good and ready to go. A couple of quick notes. You can follow us on Facebook, Insta, Twitter. I put out show times at Podcast STS. You can usually find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, but we are in the process of switching publishers. So you're not going to be able to hear us for another couple of days, and then you will once again. You can support us on Patreon. You can become a YouTube member, and you can get your mom a mug for Father's Day, just to confuse the enemy, as my mother would say. Without further ado, let's get cracking here on Lori Vallow. Gigi, you are the Lori Vallow Daybell guru. There is news going on in this case. A hearing has been scheduled for June 15th at 9:30 a.m. What is this all about?
Well, this is to hear oral arguments on their motion for a new trial, which we knew was coming. They had 14 days after verdict to file this. It kind of came down to the wire, but I was surprised it went as long as it did. But so there's 3 issues that they're talking about: that the court misdirected the jury in a matter of law as it related to instructions on conspiracy. The court misdirected the jury in a matter of law as it related to the amended indictment. And then third, related to that juror interview that Nate Eaton of East Idaho News did several days. Actually, it was a Friday that we got verdict. That interview was on a Wednesday, saying that maybe he knew more about Charles Vallow than he was supposed to. But I mean, Nate did a follow-up interview and the guy's like, yeah, I watched Dateline with my wife that Sunday after I was released. So those are the 3 arguments for a new trial. We'll see. I don't know that it goes far, but you know, it's what she's entitled to. So there you go.
The law does allow for that. Tilo in Boston, yay. Gigi, whoop, whoop, love that Southern gal. Followed by this one, which made me laugh a little bit. Oh, my God, y'all, this Portland serial killer is going to make me start day drinking. I wish that was today's topic. That is tomorrow night's topic. We've got several criminal profilers. We have an FBI legend in Greg McCrary, who joined the Bureau in 1969 and has a lot to say. as well as Detective Sergeant Chris Anderson from the First 48. So check that out tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Meanwhile, good evening to you as well, Candy. Sky, to you. So Jim Archibald, the defense attorney for Lori Vallow Daybell and John Thomas, claimed that this juror, Saul Hernandez, knew about evidence that was not presented during the trial, and that instructions given to the jurors were confusing. And that's where this motion was, or why this motion was filed, and why they're going to have this court hearing. And then the lawyers go on to cite a portion of this interview that Gigi just mentioned that he did with East Idaho News, and said that it raised some red flags. Is this going to go anywhere? I mean, it's legally, it is, obviously the defendant's right for her lawyers to file this motion, but is it going to be a dollar short and a day late?
From a defense attorney perspective, you have to raise the issues and make sure they're raised and preserved, especially for purposes of appeal. In any murder case, there's going to be follow-up appeals. So I think they have to raise the issues. I think following the first juror interview, I'm not surprised. Obviously, the second clarified a lot of things. I don't think it's going to carry the day for a new trial. I don't know if any of these issues are. I think probably the most compelling is the amended information. If you can make an argument that it was a substantial change that would have required a new preliminary hearing or new witnesses or a different trial strategy or something along those lines. I've seen courts send cases back, appellate courts send cases back on that, but I don't know that any of these others are likely going to carry the day.
Yeah, and Robin, to you, I know you're not a lawyer, but you're surrounded by enough on TV all the time. Jim Archibald, referring to the jury, he was the lead defense counsel. He says we can only conclude that the juror, this one juror, Saul Hernandez, relied on information not presented in court to reach his conclusion that Arizona dropped the ball and should have done more even before Charles Vallow was shot and killed by Alex Cox. Essentially, the defense is saying that this guy, Saul Hernandez, one of the jurors, raised concerns about something that happened in Arizona that was not supposed to be part of what the jury deliberated about. And then the juror was asked about this and said he actually heard about it on Dateline after the fact.
Right.
You think there's some sort of legal recourse here that can occur, or again, is it just grasping at straws right now? This was a heinous crime that she was convicted of, multiple crimes.
So I'll always defer to Sky on this one when it comes to what grounds they had to stand on. And I was thinking and talking about this the other day. No, I think it's a waste of money, the public money, to do this again because it was so overwhelming, all the evidence they had. But the defense attorney obviously has to do what she can. What I'm really curious about on this, though, is Lori. She, there's been a lot of hypotheses that she was literally leading the team, and what she wanted to have happen is why they it looks like they threw in the towel at the end, saying they didn't prove their case. And I'm like, what? Everyone was so shocked by that. And then it started leaking out that the Chad's defense team might be looking at placing all the blame on Lori as the real mastermind behind everything. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes? I certainly don't. But I'm just curious if Lori heard that, and if she's leading that team, she might be reversing and trying to get a new trial to maybe just say, hey, she protected Chad throughout this as her savior. I'm wondering if she wants another shot to maybe throw him under the bus instead. Pure hyperbole, but it was just kind of when you follow the arc of people's lives and how they react and how they respond and how they think, that would fit her brain pattern. Now, whether her defense attorney is following that or not, who knows? But I found that really interesting.
Sky, you want to chime in on that? It is interesting because if you recall, Jim Archibald in closing arguments threw Chad under the bus, and Gigi can attest to that. And apparently reports were that Lori Vallow was not happy. Do you think she's had a change of heart? Is Robin's supposition possible that now they're trying to filed this motion to get a new trial to then throw Chad completely under the bus, Guy?
He's the expert in behavioral analysis. I do think it's entirely possible. And I think anyone sitting in Lori's shoes right now is thinking, well, really, should I have done that? Or was that the right thing to do? Or who knows what she's thinking. I think these are filed as a matter of course in most cases, to be honest. You rarely see first degree felony cases with murder or any violent or aggravated crimes where you don't see something filed for a motion for a new trial, whether it be, objections and rulings on those, or, everybody tries to find juror misconduct. I will say this is notable about the juror. I went back and watched his interviews today. He was the one holdout, he said, at least on the stuff with Tylee. And so I think, it's somewhat, it sort of makes it an interesting argument. If he's your one guy really questioning beyond a reasonable doubt with regard to evidence, and is he the guy you want to start questioning as to whether or not they followed the rules?
Good. That's a great point. Gigi, so you brought this up, and I've got the quote here. So Saul Hernandez, this juror from the Lori Vallow Daybell trial, spoke to Nate Eaton of East Idaho News, who you know well, and he said, and this is a direct quote, "Once the verdict was final and we were released from court on Friday, May 12th, as you can imagine, most people would have a bunch of questions on their mind. On Sunday, my wife said to me, 'Do you want to catch a new episode of Dateline?' Like all of us. And I said, 'Cool, let's watch it.' Obviously, I was intrigued, and that's when I learned in Arizona there's footage from an encounter with Charles where he's clearly telling the police that his wife has deemed him a zombie. To me, those were significant red flags about something that's not normal." He sounds like a stand-up guy. Do you believe him? Do you think he's being honest here, Gigi?
I really do. I mean, look, I sat and watched this jury every day for 6 weeks, and the reaction in the beginning when they started really giving these little bite-sized pieces of this religious aspect, or if you even want to call it religious, they were shocked. And I watched him and he was shocked. And as the 6 weeks progressed, they got less and less shocked about when things got really weird. But I'm sure a lot of these jurors, once they were released, said, "Oh my gosh, this documentary that they asked me about during jury selection, let's go watch it. It's full of the whole case and more with Charles." And here's the thing. I totally believe Saul, and Saul is not wrong. They dropped the ball with Charles. And I mean, that investigation, I have no legal background. I think like a juror, but reading through those Chandler documents when they were released, I thought to myself, reading the statements, because that was before we had the video portion of their interviews there at the police station with Lori, Alex, and Tylee the day Charles was murdered, I started making a list of the discrepancies between the three. And it blew my mind that it wasn't caught by people that are trained to do this. It was blaring, just in your face things. So he's not wrong. But I do think, look, how can you prove that he knew before? The interview came after verdict, after they were cleared to talk to media, watch things about the trial. Even if he did watch something before, they'll never be able to prove it. So I think it's kind of a moot point as far as that argument as to why she should get a new trial.
Yeah, and I think the bigger issue here, and this is for you, Robin. So there is this body cam footage in Chandler, Arizona, where Charles Vallow, the fourth husband, is basically, I don't want to say pleading, that might be a strong word, but he is telling police on video that his wife is nuts. She's basically classified him as a zombie. He's worried for his life, and he ends up dying. Do you think that Chandler PD handled this correctly? I know, hindsight is 2020, but did they handle it correctly? And do you think they're looking now at this and investigating what happened with their department?
There's always hindsight. There's always 2020 vision on these things. And we've actually had a lot of this recently. I mean, even the case that Sky's working now, the husband was saying, "My wife is trying to poison me." I mean, it was really, at least that's what was reported. And so there's a lot of these things that law enforcement is fearful of taking action on because of all the lawsuits that's been coming against them. I've covered a lot of this with law enforcement inaction. I mean, all the trial, the one trial going on in Florida right now for the cop that froze and didn't go in to save the children. Some are saying he was fearful to take action because of possible retribution against him. So there's a lot of this going on in law enforcement where damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. That's the type of situation. You don't know what's true. You don't know with our society's lack of problem solving skills right now. They're going from 0 to 100 on, everything's fine, so I'm going to get a gun or poison someone. And you don't know which person you're dealing with is actually at that point. So it's a challenging area.
Crazy love for Gigi, little G rocking it, followed by much love to Gigi. Been listening to her ever since she first mentioned her podcast on the Lori Vallow subreddit. And then we've got
y'all?
this.
I'm reading your comments. Love all y'all.
And then Raymond Weiss. It's the children book lady's lawyer. She is so much more than that. This is a seasoned criminal defense attorney who's handled a lot of high profile cases and knows the law. And that's why I'm about to ask her. Just basically what I asked Robin, you see the Chandler PD responding to Charles Vallow, who was ultimately murdered or killed in self-defense, as the claim goes. Could there be some sort of claim against the Chandler Police Department? I'm very pro law enforcement. I just want to get your perspective legally, because he basically said his life was in danger and then his life ended. What do you think?
Right.
Sir?
I mean, you can file a lawsuit against anyone. Whether or not you prevail on it is another question. For the most part, law enforcement and prosecutors enjoy the benefits of immunity, and in pretty broad immunity when they're acting within the scope of their employment or investigating certain things. So, I mean, could someone potentially, yes, threats without something more? I mean, I certainly think it's something to be followed up on. I don't think it's anything that law enforcement should ever discount or ignore, or anyone else probably for that reason. But threats without something more, I think, or absent further investigation, or a little bit difficult. It's unfortunate that sometimes those threats come to fruition. I think the immunity standard at least in the 10th Circuit is really high. I used to practice in the 9th Circuit. I would imagine they probably enjoy a similar discretion when it comes to immunity. So I don't know that that's something that anyone would ever prevail on. I think you'd probably run into that bar, and that's about as far as you would get.
Gigi, how do you say jail, Gigi?
I call it the pokey because it's a Southern saying. It's the pokey.
Oh, the pokey. There you go. The pokey. So speaking of the pokey, that is where Lori Vallow Daybell is right now. However, she's going to be out of there July 31st because that is the day she is going to be sentenced. Gigi, is there any chance in hell she's getting anything but life? And have you had any time? I mean, you've had time, but the state said it was, money, sex, power. Have you given more thought to motive? Because really a lot of people have keyed in now on this Social Security insurance, but what about motive in all of this, besides being a little loopy, of course?
I think she gets life in prison. I mean, she's convicted of, everything. It's life in prison. And don't forget, she still has the 2 conspiracy charges in Arizona for Charles and Brandon Boudreaux. So that's coming up as well. And I think that in the beginning, I didn't really buy the, sex, money, power thing. But I really, after sitting through the evidence, it does make sense. I think a lot of it was just gasoline and fire between Lori and Chad. I think Lori believed what Chad was selling more than he believed what he was selling. I think really he just found a band of misfits that really believed he was the brother of Jesus in a past life. And I think that gave him this feeling of, he was this big dude, that he could have people do this. And, That's why I'm interested if Chad goes to trial. I want to see his text messages. I want to see where his phone pings were. Was he there in the townhomes the night the kids were murdered? Because one thing that stuck out to me at trial was they talked about Chad taking JJ upstairs. And then when Chad came down, he had scratches on his neck. Now, Chad is a tall guy. He's like 6'3", 6'4". I never would have thought that, but somebody told me he's really tall, which would make me think JJ was on the bed potentially. So it kind of indicates maybe there was some prior hard handling of JJ on Chad's part. I don't know. It's still, I think it's one of those things, though, we'll never really know why. You can't explain these things away. I think it was like a buffet of things that came together, and just there's this huge, massive trail of death in their wake. And I think that I don't know that Lori herself would ever agree, even with a new trial, to throw Chad under the bus. She is still all in 100%. I've been told she still thinks her kids are fine, that we're all overreacting essentially. Chad, on the other hand, he's going to throw her under the bus and back over her a few times for good measure if he takes it to trial. So I just really feel like this is going to be one of those things where we know some of the reason, but we're never going to know exactly why. Was it that Chad just wanted his blonde goddess without kids around? Who knows? But it would have been a lot easier to send them different ways with Kay and Larry and that kind of stuff. They would have gotten away with this, I think, had they not killed the kids.
We're all going to wonder why, except for Robin, because he knows the answer. Robin, what happened here? Do you think that, as Gigi said, it is kind of a buffet of events, colliding in a horrific manner? People are starting to point, like I said, a little more to maybe financial gain. Obviously, she's not, as Steve Cohen, our producer, would say, she needs a checkup from the neck up. She probably needs a lot more than that. But have you given more thought to potential motive here and what's really going on with her?
With people like this, and I got a good friend, his name's Dr. Chris Mahandi, and one of his great books he wrote, she's got a broken brain. I think we have a tendency to try to overthink people that shouldn't be overthunk. I've said this before, and I truly believe it. I hate using this word, she's an idiot. She was not thinking beyond, I want to live in Hawaii. And I think when we looked at the nonverbals of her being served in Hawaii, Chad's the one that took interest in the papers, and she's like, "Get out of my son." I mean, it was really I don't think she had a plan. And when I last time I was on your show, I can't remember his name, your cult expert.
Yeah, Rick Allen Ross.
Yeah, Rick. I read Rick's book, and it was interesting reading Rick's book on diving deeper on cults. This was such a bad cult, almost. It's like a sun that tried to be a sun and became a Jupiter or something. I mean, it was just because she was a charismatic one. He was the one with the ideas. And so they don't mix like this. You need one person with a brain, with a charisma, and the forthright to move forward. And this was a bad mix. And she had a trail of death behind her already, starting with the weird death of her sister in 1998. And when you look at that arc of crazy that follows her life, and also the arc that no one wanted to be friends with her later on that came to her defense. I mean, that's just kind of a pattern of she's an unhealthy person, has been an unhealthy person a very long time. Chad's a wannabe and got enamored with someone that showed him some attention, and then there's your recipe for fire. And she came up with kind of capitalizing on his crazy ideas that he didn't have the charisma to move forward on, came up with the ideas that, oh, now we can take their money because they're zombies. And so I can live in Hawaii forever. And that's it. There was no further point of that story. I literally think the story in her mind was ending right there in Hawaii, and no one's going to pay attention.
Yeah, and that part of it, like that really intrigues me at how, I guess, to use your word, stupid people can be. Sky, I'm curious from you. I mean, you deal with your clients, defendants all the time, criminal defendants all the time. Do you find in a lot of these cases that they weren't thinking about the consequences or the repercussions? They just committed these acts without thinking beyond their emotion or their passion?
I do. I don't think most people, at least most people I've ever represented, don't necessarily start out with a plan and a follow through after that plan. I think a lot of things are products of, just the timing of things, or, just the circumstances. I don't I don't know. I wouldn't say most of my clients, especially in homicide cases, it's after the fact. And that's why most people get caught. Honestly, I think most of the people I've represented get caught in trying to cover things up. Had they, maybe done nothing afterwards, it might have gone better, right? But it's always the cover up and the people involved and destruction of evidence or whatever that seems to get people jammed up, and then people talking, and then they get caught. So no, I don't think people, maybe some, but I don't think they think this is worth life in prison or this is worth the death penalty. I don't think they think that they're going to ever, one, for someone who can commit a crime like that, I'm not sure it matters, because they're not thinking like the rest of us, right? Part of the laws we have are deterrent in nature, but they only work for people who are deterred by the consequences.
Yeah, Robin, am I weird? Or, when I have a deviant thought, or my mother says something that makes my blood pressure boil and I want to commit a certain act, I think to myself, wow, I wouldn't want to spend time in prison. I wouldn't do well there. Am I an outlier, or do most people think that way? Obviously, Lori Vallow did not.
Well, one thing is you're not edging up high on psychopathy, luckily, on that case, because you actually think about the consequence of your actions. You play things forward. You storytell in your mind. And when you're dealing with someone, and I'm not a clinician, so I cannot, clinically say she's a psychopath, but by God, she is exhibiting all the indicators of a psychopath. No empathy. And when you're trying to place behaviors that we have as human beings that are empathetic human beings on people that aren't, that's when we overcomplicate it. It is literally, you're dealing with a predator, a wolf that just wanted to kill to serve her needs to just live in Hawaii. It's literally, I think, that simple. It's not that complicated with her. Many times my team has gone in to consult on cases, and we're trying to strategize an interview strategy for someone who's edging up high on psychopathy. And our psychologists would always say, you're thinking way too hard. They're going to use that against you. The only thing that matters to them is grandiosity. 100%, that's it. They don't care. Just want to be the best. They want to service themselves, and that is it. The other thing that she also didn't have, and this is what the cult area comes in, she was surrounded by people, unlike you. If you have a deviant thought in your head, you're surrounded by other healthy people that invalidate those unhealthy thoughts and unhealthy behaviors. She was surrounding herself with people that are also saying things, well, that kind of makes sense. Sure, people can be possessed, until they didn't, because they didn't isolate their cult. When you don't isolate the cult, then the cult is getting leakage from everyone else saying, that's a little crazy, but she was still only listening to what you want. She had her own confirmation bias. We literally only consume the information we want to consume to validate our own opinions. Robert Greene wrote the great book, Laws of Human Nature, and that is a huge law of human nature that does apply to whether you're psychopathic or not.
Wow, that's even kind of more chilling, that she just wanted to escape to Hawaii, and that was all that was on her mind.
Again, that is purely what I think, by watching and observing. I think
you bring up a great point, that people sometimes do overthink all of that. Old Lady Snoop with a very pressing question. Gigi, you posted a picture with a former student. What did you teach, Gigi?
I was an in-house substitute at a local high school, and they had a need in the special education room. The teacher had to leave suddenly for personal reasons, and there was a class full of kids that didn't have a teacher. They offered it to me, and I took it, and it was one of the best years of my life. And so the girl that I posted the picture with today, she was a senior when I took that class. We had a great year, got her a job. We helped build like social skills, work skills, that kind of thing. And she's still there 5 years later. So I pick her up every now and then. We go have breakfast and just catch up. She's a great girl. And I'm so happy she's still in my life. It was such a rewarding year for me.
Gigi with the heart, all heart. Ketchup says, aloha, STS Nation, best guest. Gigi, you rock. Followed by, look at this. We are, in fact, a global show. Helene O'Cleary, STS Nation extends to all corners of Ireland. Hi to Gigi and the leader of our nation. Wow. Followed by Gigi's the best. Look at this. She gets so much love. Gigi, speaking of not getting any love, we're going to hear victim impact statements the day of that sentencing. I know you're... you know some of family members in that circle, by the way, I did not to name drop, but I will, spoke to Kay Woodcock, and I think she might come on the show next week to discuss her very personal feelings. So I'm thankful to her. She was traveling this week, but hopefully she will be here next week with Larry Woodcock to discuss the case. But with that said, what are you expecting in terms of victim impact statements? We remember, obviously, her son Colby Ryan and her had a kind of a stare down. I'm sure Larry Woodcock has stuff to say, but what are you expecting from this?
I think it's going to be the one and only time that they can sit in a room with that woman and tell them what she's done to them. Because you think about Kay and Larry, not only did they lose a grandson, Kay lost her brother, Charles. I mean, there's two victims directly, and they love Tylee. So, and now too, they feel Tammy's loss, even though they never met her. That's how, unfortunately, this tragedy is it bonded them even to Tammy Daybell, who they had never met. I think it's going to be huge. Law Crime is sending me up there for sentencing. So I'm glad I get to sit in there and see this come full circle. We launched the podcast the day they found the kids' bodies, which is in 3 days, by the way. That'll be the 3-year anniversary of when Tylee and JJ's remains were found in Chad's backyard. So I think it's going to be powerful, and I don't think they'll hold back. Knowing Kay and Larry, they're the most gracious, salt of the earth people I've ever met, but they've hurt so much, and it's their one time. So I don't expect any coddling of Lori. No way. I think they're going to let it rip, and I think they'll be classy doing it. But knowing Lori, she'll sit there with a grin on her face as if, she's watching a sitcom, because that's essentially how she acted during trial. Yeah. Very disconnected. There was no connect whatsoever. Although I thought it was a little weird that that one afternoon she wanted to be excused when they showed those crime scene photos, because it's been easy for her to be a little smug, but there are certain times where when really painful things are revealed in court, she is sitting in that room with Kay and Larry Woodcock, sometimes Annie Cushing, who is Tylee's aunt, and the brother of Lori's, third husband, Joe Ryan, who died mysteriously. That was ruled natural. I'll always have questions. But yeah, it's going to be heartbreaking, because that's going to be what ties her case up in a bow. And then we tuck that away. So I hope I hope they let her have it. I mean, look at when you see those crime scene photos, it really drives home the evil that went into what they did to these kids. So no mercy.
Yeah. Jetty Meow Meow. The only thing Lori's going to get out of all these appeals motions is her hopes up, but I don't even know if that's going to happen, because I don't know if she has the capability to do that. Hello, greetings from sunny Saskatchewan. Gotta love that. Gigi has a great voice as the love continues to pour in. Sky, back to you here. So she's one half of a toxic duo. The other, of course, is Chad Daybell. His trial is set for, ironically, April Fool's Day 2024, but it's nothing funny about that. Do you think he's going to try to plea out before this trial begins? He is potentially facing the death penalty here.
I think we kind of touched on this a little bit last time when we discussed this case. Anytime the death is on the table, if you have the opportunity to get something with less than death, especially in a case like this where you already have a co-defendant who's been convicted pretty decisively when it comes to a jury coming back that quickly, I would certainly, as his counsel, be trying to resolve this case in some manner. But as with Lori, I'd probably ask this question: is would he even entertain it? I mean, is he the kind of guy who I've represented clients that I have begged to take plea deals because it would have saved them from themselves, and they won't. And some people just, whatever it is about them, can't or won't or need to have their day in court. And he very well, based on the way he acted throughout since the kid's death and the investigation, he may be one of those people who would just never entertain one.
And Sky, someone raises the point, how can these motions, she's asking Gigi, but you're the attorney, so I'll ask you. She's asking, how can this motion be filed if she hasn't even been sentenced yet? Is this legal just protocol here that they're going to do it ahead of the sentencing?
It is. So motions for a new trial have to be raised prior to sentencing. Every state statute's a little bit different in the federal statute as far as timing, but they have to be brought prior to sentencing, usually within, some are within a certain time of the plea, some are within a certain time prior to that sentencing date. But if you don't raise these issues in a motion for a new trial prior to the sentencing, then you essentially have waived them. So it's most of the time these fail. And usually they're just, like I said, a matter of course. But, as a defense attorney, you are always looking ahead at preserving the record for appeal and, trying to put as many issues out there that might carry the day, on appeal following a sentence.
And Sky, is it a matter of be careful what you wish for? Is it possible? Let's just talk hypothetically.
Yeah.
This motion is, is filed and they decide to give her a new trial. Could she then face a death penalty in a second trial potentially?
That's a good question. I think it would go back to the way the trial was.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering, maybe she's biting off more than
in Idaho.
Yeah.
I think you would just get, generally when cases are remanded back from or given a new trial, it would just be, you would just get a new trial. It'd be like if a mistrial had happened or something mid-trial, you would just start over with a new jury and then cure whatever those deficiencies were.
Got it. Gigi, to you from Andrea. I've often wondered if JJ's biological parents have had any comments on the verdict or about the case in general. Has there been anyone we've heard from, specifically them or otherwise, that has been kind of interesting to you?
JJ's biological mom unfortunately passed away last year. And JJ's biological dad, I don't know if he actually put out a statement after verdict, but, I know it's relief. I've seen pictures of him with JJ when JJ was bigger, and he looks like his daddy. So it's, I'm sure there's some peace in their hearts with the verdict. It's a weight off. I know with Kay and Larry, they didn't realize how much of a weight this was until they were free from this pending trial. So I would imagine and hope that JJ's dad feels the same. It doesn't breathe life back into them, but it is resolution. So and I think it's safe to assume that, Chad's trial, it's a lot of the same evidence. I've always heard the case against Chad was a little bit stronger than Lori's. And I was actually surprised when I believe Sky mentioned that the juror got hung up on Tylee. I really thought it would be Tammy Daybell that the jury would get hung up on, if anything, because there was very little direct text message evidence or anything like that about her death, as opposed to Tylee that she's calling dark and saying that she's turned into an entity named Hillary and that kind of thing. But so there's so much. But JJ's dad, I hope he's feeling some peace with that verdict, some justice for his boy.
And Robin, I promise we're getting back to you. We're just getting through some legal issues here. So back to Sky.
He looks so chill. He's just like hanging back, chilling out.
This guy's not that chill. He was a Marine. This guy's not that chill.
That's why he's chill now. He's done all the hardcore stuff.
Yeah. Smooth.
That's right. There you go.
He's been up. He was doing push-ups at 3:30 in the morning, I bet.
So swimming now. I can't do those anymore.
Yeah. So Sky, to you, Mark O'Mara is a well-known criminal defense attorney. He was interviewed and he came out and he said, I believe this was NewsNation that he talked to. Speaking of Chad Daybell's team, he said, it's great. They get to see what's coming and the best plan for it. I love when an other co-defendant goes first because they get to see the state's best case. Do you agree with that? That they've now basically been shown the cards and it bodes better for Chad than it did for Lori?
Absolutely. Anytime you can sever a trial and make someone else go first, you're in a better place. Not only do you get to see the evidence, you get to see how people testify and what works with them on, if it's cross-examination or whatever it is. And I think there's a real benefit to that because sometimes, some criminal trials are different than civil trials. We don't get depositions. we might get recorded interviews or things like that, but we don't, unless people have testified at a prelim or an evidentiary hearing, the chances to get everybody on the stand prior to trial or to see how they're going to testify is, almost impossible. So, having the benefit of that, really lets you set up the right questions, what questions land well, what questions you avoid because they maybe didn't answer them the way you thought they might. So things like that. So I think anytime, and especially when it results in a conviction, you feel pretty good about your chances, or at least, the way you're going to deal with people.
Yeah. This question popping up here from Barb Murray that was just posed. Can they retry if overturned and charge a death penalty? I don't think we know the answer. Gigi, I didn't mean to cut you off if that was you, but real quick.
I just wanted to sort of clarify. I think there was plenty of evidence for that conviction for Tammy. That was just the one I was a little worried about in relation to the other two. I mean, it's so easy to think that it's going to be obvious to the jury that Tylee and JJ, that's their mother. You have one job as a mom. I mean, a lot of jobs, but your main job is to keep your kids physically safe. And she allowed this to happen. So for me, we all kind of thought, if there's anything they get hung up on, if this goes into 2 and 3 days, what do you think it would be? We all kind of agreed maybe Tammy, but like somebody mentioned, she was buying the rings. He called her Viola, call me, she's close. It was all there. We just kind of were like, what's the one charge we felt like there wasn't an aha moment? And that was it. But the jury's smart and they got the right call on that, obviously. I didn't want people to think I'm sitting here saying they didn't have nothing because they had plenty.
And Gigi, this is for you, even though it mentions Sky's name. To defend the accused, is Lori using funds that her husband's death provided? Is she using any funds that he had earned? And is she using his money to defend herself, even if married? Do you know if she's not touching those funds, right? Because it was a public defender, correct?
Yeah, so she has public defenders. After Mark Means was removed, who was a private attorney, she got Jim Archibald, John Thomas. And so if you remember, he changed the beneficiary from Lori for that $1 million life insurance policy to his sister Kay, because he said if something happened to him, he knew, or he had thought, and gosh, how we wish it would have happened, that Kay and Larry would end up raising JJ and they would need that money. Charles was worried JJ would never be independent on his own and would require assistance throughout his life in some form. So the money that she got for Joe Ryan, or that Tylee was supposed to get, I'm sure that was long gone even before Chad Daybell even came into the picture. And so she's broke. She has no money. And I think Chad had $130,000 left when he got or when Lori was going for bail. It was like he had $130,000 left of the $430, I'm assuming, unless he moved it around. And then he's also signed the deed to his house over to John Pryor. So neither one of them swimming in the money. They ain't swimming in the ocean in Hawaii. They're in the pokey.
In the pokey.
I gotta move my thing. I got a keyboard over here. I gotta something.
I'm stealing that phrase.
Meanwhile, while she's doing that, Angelina says, "Sweet JJ, I didn't know his mom had passed. She was there to meet her baby." Sky, back to you. So, and then we'll get off the legal stuff here. But back to Mark O'Mara. He basically said, "Look, we do what's called damage control." Speaking of Chad Daybell, if he truly wants to live out his days without getting executed, then they should be reaching out to the state to say, we're done. We'll take the life sentence and move on, save a lot of money for Idaho, save a lot of time, a lot of trouble, and just move the case forward. Do you think that is a best case scenario for Chad Daybell, is to just live to see the end of his days, but from behind prison bars?
I do. I think it's probably the best scenario for everybody involved. Like I said, if you're his attorneys, you're essentially begging for a life without parole plea offer, just to be done. With regard to the death penalty, it creates essentially a separate trial that happens after the guilt phase for the penalty phase, followed by appeals that last all of eternity. So I think if I'm his counsel, that's what I'm trying to do. And then trying to talk him into taking it.
MD 2020, if I'm saying that right. I'm more suspicious of his 3 jury selections, Gigi. And then, have we heard anything? We've heard that Lori was not too pleased with the closings, but have we heard anything from Chad's perspective on this?
It's been radio silence as far as Chad goes. Somebody asked about Pryor being in the courtroom. I'll tell you, he watched that jury during key moments when these texts were being read. It sound like it came from a 13-year-old boy. There were things where he looked mortified as it was being read. He definitely was sizing up even the public. So yeah, he had that advantage. Sky was talking about that earlier. But yeah, look, Chad would be really smart to take the plea and just get life and go bye-bye, because it ain't looking too good for Chatty boy. And I will not do a dramatic reading of Loin Fire. I've got it on YouTube as private. I have high schoolers. They were like, take that down. We have friends out there. So it exists, but I'll wait till they're of age and then I'll publish it.
I would definitely embarrass my kids. Com Kitty 2, to you, Robin. I don't think Lori will ever throw Chad under the bus. Be abused, I'm not sure what that is. She would have to accept killing her children, and she was deceived, mental breakdown. Do you agree with any or part of this comment here?
Yeah. Like everyone's been saying, her mind is set on how things are going. I found it interesting that might have been a tactic that they were thinking about, but her mind is set. I'm sad for the victims being, reading their statements, because I don't think it's going to land on her, like we've said, at all. I don't think it's going to impact her whatsoever, because she's not thinking up there. There's nothing going on up there. It'll be interesting with Chad as well. I suspect that he's going to follow what his defense is saying. He followed her. He's a follower, from what we've been seeing. If he was a leader, he would have formed his cult years ago, before Lori even showed up. It took her and her charisma to start the thing actually moving, because their business was killing people, because they had no other ability to make money for themselves. And so the only money they could make was insurance money, so that kind of shows you the level of competency they had at adulting, as my kids say, So I think if we're lucky and the victims are lucky and the state of Idaho is lucky, they're going to plead out, and he's going to spend the rest of his life behind bars.
Kevin Christine, if I'm saying it correctly, hello from Salt Lake City, home of Sky Lazaro. First live, much love. Thank you for joining. MC Spunky, friend of the show here, saying Chad is adult, but would be smart to take a plea. Then Tilo, our friend in Boston. By the way, Tilo, you're lucky. I guessed like 15 years below your actual age, so you owe me. Chad would never even look at her during all those hearings together. I think he's not in love anymore, but she is. Robin, you're the sort of psychological mind expert here. What do you make of that?
Love's an interesting word. That's what I keyed in on. I don't think what she experiences is what we understand as love as normal human beings. She found someone that gave her psychological need to be the center of the universe. She is that self-centered that's why she's done beauty pageants. That's why she's been on game shows. That's why she wanted to be a mother, until being a mother was no longer convenient for her to be the center. And so when Chad gave her that center of the universe, that became her center, her power that she went to. That's how she would define love. But if we were to get in there and rattle around, we wouldn't understand what that meant.
Barb Murray weighing in, poor Charles Vallow, God bless him. Followed by Ketchup, justice for Charles Vallow. Charles was pleading. We saw them drop the ball. This is going back to our earlier conversation.
Yeah.
MC Spunky weighing in once again. Gigi's Southern accent is so sexy. There you go. And then Jersey Jen Castaldi. Robin is amazing. Where can we follow you, sir? Where can they follow you, Robin Dreek?
Peopleformula.com is my website. My podcast is Forged by Trust. So I just talk to spy recruiters, and thought leaders. I just had Neil deGrasse Tyson on. He was an interesting guy to have on.
By the way, Robin Dreek, do you know my childhood friend right here, Mark Polymeropoulos?
Oh, yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I grew up with Mark. I've known that.
Wow, that is a small world.
Yeah, known him since second grade. We once had a baseball catch. Me, Matt, and Mark were inseparable. And Matt's dad said, don't throw that baseball in the front yard. And we kept throwing the baseball in the front yard. and Matt's dad had a brand new car, I think a station wagon, and this was like in late 70s. And Mark and I were throwing the ball, and it landed on Matt's dad's windshield. And he was a scary dude. He had a big beard. He was
Yeah.
professor.
I don't know Mark personally. We follow each other. We have the same friends and obviously another new friend. And so for those listening, he's a former CIA case officer who actually was on Cuba and suffers from the Cubans doing really bad things with the radio waves at him and everything. He's had an amazing career with the CIA, keeping the country safe. And yes, baseball, from his book, you read it right in there. It's a major theme in his life with his kids. He still does it.
Yep, big. He's a huge baseball fan.
Anyway, we digress.
We digress for a moment, but Sky, back to you. What is the path that we can expect for Lori's appeals? How long does this go on for? Is this like in perpetuity here?
Probably not in perpetuity. She'll have 30 days from the date of her sentencing to file at least a notice of appeal and notice up some of the issues that she might want to be raising. At that point, generally what happens is other counsel is going to get appointed on this case. It won't be trial counsel. It'll be somebody new. And the state will have people either people that they have on contract to do it, or if they have like a public defender appellate division that will take those cases on. I would expect that it's going to, by the time they get the transcript and actually get the first, appeals filed, not just the notice of appeal, but what she's actually appealing, it's going to take some time. Everybody always asks for additional time. You got there's 16 weeks of trial that they did. I mean, that's a lot of testimony to go through if you're the appellate lawyer, looking at were objections missed, or were rulings correct, or should defense have done something different? Was there prosecutorial misconduct? Were there rulings by the judge early on that should be brought up? Should she have ever been deemed competent for trial? Those types of things. Mm-hmm. So I think we're a ways out from actually even seeing an appellate brief from her. But as far as timing, she's going to get one appeal essentially in this case. And, the Supreme Court's going to decide what they're going to decide on it. She can still file what are called post-conviction relief act appeals, that aren't direct appeals, but they tend to go to factual innocence, but it can't be stuff that's brought up and disposed of in the initial appeal. So you're a little bit more limited.
Barb Murray here. I can't believe, Gigi, this for you, that Melanice isn't arrested. Wow. Followed by this sticker here. Did Melanice get immunity? Proof she knew well. Where do things stand with Melanice?
It's a good question. I think if she's not charged in at least Brandon and the attempt on him, it's just a lack of digital evidence. That's really what this case was built around, was the digital evidence trail. And if she's a little bit younger, knows how this works, things that can be deleted, they're not always deleted. I don't know. I feel like Lori just didn't care. I felt like in her mind, she thought the end of the world was coming. And, if you think about it, why would she assume anybody never would want to see JJ or Tally ever again or hear from them? But I think with Melanice, maybe if she doesn't catch a charge, there's just no digital evidence there. It's the same with Chad. They declined to indict him in Charles's murder or charge him because there was a little chance of a successful prosecution. I think it comes down to that digital evidence. I'm not sure. I kind of feel like we would have seen that by now if she were going to be charged, honestly. I don't know. Then again, maybe they're waiting on sentencing to wrap up to let Idaho finish their case completely. And maybe we do see charges because, in my opinion, there are a lot of people associated with this case that needed to have been charged, but maybe it just wasn't there.
Bobby says, if Chad goes on trial, I'm heading to Idaho and I'm bringing the popcorn. Gigi, back to you on this one here from Jenny Meow Meow. When Melanice's kids realize what she said about them and what she may have been planning for them, it is going to be horrendous for them. I'm glad they have Brandon to protect them. Can you kind of fill the audience in on what she is talking about here?
We learned at trial that Melanice had been told that I believe 3 of her children were dark, and that she, this was a text from Lori to somebody else. I'm not sure, maybe Chad. But Lori said that Melanice understood this was sort of part of the bigger plan. And Lori said she herself was the one that was upset. The indication, of course, being that 3 of Melanice's kids are dark. We know what happens when somebody's deemed dark. They turn into a zombie. And there was that text exchange also between Lori and Chad where they're traveling with JJ and I believe 2 or 3 of Melanice's kids to California. And Chad's asking if he needs to do one of his Harry Potter spells to inflict pain on one of the kids to give him something to scream about. And Lori tells him to wait. So you see the intent there, but it appears that Melanice was aware that 3 of her own children were dark, which is scary when you go back and watch that body cam footage of when she went to Brandon's dad's house in Utah and was kind of arguing and talking over the law enforcement officer saying, I want a welfare check. And then she asked for a victim's advocate. Alex Cox parked down the road looking creepy as all get out in the car. Scary to think what would have happened if Brandon hadn't taken those kids and went into hiding.
Linda Feldman, I did get your email. I'm just lagging behind, so bear with me. But she has a comment. And Robin, I'm going to throw this one to you. This is an interesting point that's come up before, but haven't discussed in a while. Maybe I missed something, but why weren't any of Chad's kids zombies? And why didn't Lori ask that same question? I've heard, and we'll let Gigi weigh in after you, Robin, but they're a little bit older and they weren't in the way maybe, but what's your take on why only her children were dark?
The pattern, again, we see arcs and patterns through life. I think most, if not all the people, I'd have to check on Melanice's kids that were deemed dark because they had an insurance policy. And if they weren't in the way and if they didn't have an insurance policy, they're fine.
Follow the money, as they say. Gigi, do you agree with that assessment?
I do. And I think the reason that Lori never questioned it is because April Raymond said, who is her friend from Hawaii, really beautiful woman. I just adore April Raymond. She was great on the stand, but she said that back when Lori and Charles were living in Hawaii, that Lori felt Charles wasn't her spiritual equal, and that caused a lot of problems for Lori. Well, then you meet a guy who says, hey, I was the brother of Jesus, right, in a past life. Archibald cracked me up when he's asking, who was it? It was Audrey, who said Lori threatened to kill her. Did Chad ever say in the 1700s, I came in as a loser? Like in any life, was he ever just some big loser? No, he was Methuselah or whatever. I keep wanting to say Mercurochrome, but my grandma told me to go to church, getting those mixed up. But yeah, so I think it's just one of those things that I don't think she questioned Chad. I think what he said was kind of the word, and that she had met that spiritual equal in her mind that Charles never could be. And so I think if Chad said, hey, my kids aren't dark, they're from me, she probably just bought it. I mean, I really do think that just whatever Chad said, Lori was like, okay, kids need to die. Sure, I'll help you. Or I'll turn my head. It's just, it's insanity. Somebody told me they were the brother of Jesus in a past life. I would throw them in the car and take them to the nearest hospital. But you have people that were actually like, whoa, oh my gosh, I'm going to follow this guy. We're going to do some magic spells and have a lot of fun.
At least we do not go on the second date.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that would be the deal breaker.
Yeah, Skype cut that off right away. TGQ, back to Gigi here. If offered to interview Lori Vallow Daybell in the future, would you do it, Gigi? And would you do it with East Idaho News' Nate Eaton?
No, and I'll tell you why. Number one, I wouldn't want to give her a second to further her lies. Number one, you're not ever going to get any straight answer out of her. It's going to be fluff. It's going to be, maybe it's, hey, look, this is only one probation for me, so this one stinks. Maybe the next one I'll be rewarded for being a martyr in this life. And I think that maybe is how she sees herself in jail. I'm a martyr. I stood up. I was ready to lead the 144,000 and they got me. So I just don't think, I don't know. I tell you what, I think this woman and Letitia Stout are 2 women that are going to be studied by psychiatrists and psychologists for long after we're gone. They're so similar in a lot of ways, except Lori was a little bit more of a convincing liar at times because law enforcement let her go a few times before, it finally all came back around on her. but it's amazing what people believe and then how they deceive. Crazy.
Interesting to hear that you wouldn't do the interview, Gigi.
No, you would never get anything out of her other than her spewing something that's self-serving. That's all we've seen out of her. And as much as I would love to pick her brain, I don't think that I would feel dirty doing it. So no.
Papa Bear, special shout out to her in Moscow, Idaho, a place near and dear to STS Nation. And obviously, we're going to continue to cover Brian Koberger and what's going on out there. Look at this, Robin Drake. I love this gentleman talking. She obviously does not mean me, Robin. His explanation is brilliant because he is not overthinking the motives. Too many people try to make excuses for evil. I have to agree with that. Robin is breaking it down. So there you go.
Small brains like mine need small explanations. That's the way I think of it.
Yeah, I just subscribed to his podcast, actually. I can't wait to dive in.
Everyone subscribe to Robin's podcast. You're one of my top 5 channels. We got to get you to one of your top 2, and then I'll be happy. But then we're good. Is the sentencing going to be televised? Yes, it is. Moving on here. April Raymond, Gigi knows her. She's a friend of Lori Vallow Daybell's, and she spoke to NewsNation once again just the other day. She admitted that she, at this juncture, was still unsure about what had transpired or what served as a catalyst for change. In speaking to NewsNation, she says that the experience has been shattering. That is the word that she used. I'm not sure that I even completely understand what happened or what was necessarily the catalyst. Obviously talking about what happened with Lori Vallow Daybell. Robin, back to you. Is she ever going to understand this completely, or is she always going to be feeling a little confused and shattered because there is maybe no real answer that she can ascertain here?
She needs counseling. A lot of people involved in this need professional counseling and help to work and talk through this, because this Lori Daybell was part of her identity. And when you have your identity ripped from you, shown to you as being fraudulent, being wrong, you're left with, in your own perception, not much. And you have to rebuild that, and you have to have confidence in yourself again, because she's questioning her own thought process. She's questioning her own ability to trust others. So all those things that make us functioning human beings just got totally thrown under the bus. And she was shown, and thankfully she was open to it, to see it. But now it's time to heal from the pain that she was part of and that everyone was part of through this, because when your identity and your sense of feeling safe, because that's our motivation as all human beings, genetically and biologically coded, we just want to feel safe, and we take actions to feel safe. And when you've been shown that you were so close to death and destruction, it's devastating to our psyche. So yeah.
And she knew and loved those kids. They spent holidays together. Charles too. So she, I always say the living victims is such a wide net. It's not just the immediate family. It's the friends of JJ and Tylee. It's people like April that spent years bonding with everybody. So the devastation's far and wide in all these cases, not just this one, but with so many, as you increase that victim count, of course, it's such a bigger circle, and it's insane. People like April who, maybe say, why didn't I catch something? Why didn't I take her seriously when she thought, that, or she said that Charles was dark?
The most important thing in this thing too is for people to realize you don't have shame over the fact that you were manipulated. Don't have shame over the fact that you were duped by these horrible people, because that actually keeps us from healing. It keeps us down a negative self-talk road. And so, let go of the shame, because there is no shame in making a mistake when it wasn't you that made the mistake. It was you were taken advantage of in these situations. And so I think that's really a key point for people to have the courage, because it takes courage to say, I need help. Because if you were impacted by this in any aspect, go get help. No shame there. And you'll see you're not alone, because that's the big thing too. You're not alone. The people that are impacted by this, as Gigi was saying, it's a huge swath. I mean, just think about 9/11 and how many people are impacted by 9/11 because of what we saw. So that bubble burst was huge. Well, same thing here. When you have a huge impact by a cone of destruction in the immediate area, but then also you have these ripples that go out from there, just from, being so involved like we are as well. So take account of that, and don't be afraid to share.
And
Good
by the way,
point.
Robin is not comparing 9/11 to this. He was just making the comparison in terms of how things splinter
Huge
out.
impact.
Yes.
Yeah. Before you start sending me hate mail. Patty G. Back to you, Sky, here. I wonder if Judge Boyce will address Lori. I don't expect him to say anything to her. Followed here by, I hope Boyce surprises us all and blasts her. I can't recall a time where I've seen sentencing where a judge has invoked his Fifth Amendment rights.
Right.
Judges usually speak their mind. Do you expect that to be any different this time around?
I don't. I mean, he's going to have to address her to the extent that he's going to sentence her, however that is. So it's going to be, life in prison, whether it's consecutive or concurrent. Likely expected to be consecutive, just given the nature of the case and multiple victims. I do expect him to address her. I have yet to participate as a defense attorney in a sentencing where the judge did not address my client, and sometimes it's in a positive manner, even if they're sending him to prison. And sometimes then it's not in a positive manner. But I do expect him to have prepared statements, and she's going to have the opportunity to make a statement at her sentencing if she wants. She doesn't have to, but she does have the right to be heard there. It won't just be attorneys and victims in the state. So I think, I do expect the judge to address her. It'll be interesting if she says anything at all.
Gigi, do you think she'll speak? And do you think she's going to say that she was saving the 144,000 and her two children? What do you think?
I don't think she speaks. I mean, like that demeanor, as soon as that first guilty, those arms went like that. She closed off. The world's against her. So no, I don't think she'll talk. I don't think that she's brave enough to talk. I think that there's so much going on up here, or maybe there's not much going on up here. No, I don't think she'll talk at all. But I do know that it came down to the wire, whether or not she was going to get on the stand. I mean, it was a last minute decision that I think she really wanted to, because if you look back, she was always able to wiggle her way out of tight spots with law enforcement. We saw it time and time again, starting way back with Joe Ryan in the custody battle for Tylee. And so I really kind of thought she'd get on the stand. I don't think now that these guilty verdicts have come in, she'll have anything to say.
And Sky, Barb Murray writes, most hated woman in the prison. Obviously you're not in prison or been in prison, but you go to prison occasionally. How do you think she's being treated there?
Prison dynamics are interesting. They have essentially, their own government system, for lack of a better word, the way, prison operates. I don't know that she'll be hated. I mean, she may be charismatic enough that she actually garners, a following of some set. It's different going to prison for different things. I think carries different connotations and puts you into different categories, of course, where, she's not some documented gang member that's going there with some status or something. But I don't, I think that'll be an interesting dynamic in the prison. She may get along just fine because of the fact that, all, like you just said, all these times she's been able to talk her way out of things that may actually serve her very well in the prison system.
Speaking of the prison system, she's obsessed with her hair, and Brenda Lord seems to be obsessed with yours. Sky, you have beautiful hair. What is the secret, Sky Lazaro?
Well, after, who was I on with last time?
I don't even remember.
The defense attorney from Florida. I felt like I just kept
Tim Jansen.
Yeah, I was like, I better do something with it this time.
That's funny.
But thank you, Brenda.
Gigi, to you, from Laura Ferris, I will always 100% believe, you brought this up a little while ago, that she wanted to leave the courtroom that day that she had the meltdown because she didn't like the jury looking at her. Nothing to do with sadness. Do you think she makes a point here?
Big hello to Laura, who I adore, number one. Number two, yes. I think it's a combination of things. I think that it's maybe the jury. I think it's Kay and Larry. I mean, she had a life with them. things were good for many years with Lori and Charles and Kay and Larry. And then all of a sudden, you've got these terrible, unimaginable pictures up on the screen of Tylee in burnt pieces and JJ just duct taped. And I think that my question is, did maybe they show her those photos over lunch to prepare her for what was coming? Because that morning we saw a few excavation photos from Chad's yard that showed the black part of the crown of JJ's head, but we had a lunch break because Judge Boyce specifically mentioned the photos after lunch are going to be very graphic. So my question is, did they just show her over lunch? I had heard she had never seen them before. Can't verify that, but was that a moment of clarity? Because I looked to Lauren Mathias from Hidden True Crime. I was sitting there with her and I think Brian Enton. I said, like, she's legit crying when she came back in. Her face was red. It was the only time I ever saw any real emotion that pronounced out of her. I did see her cry a couple of times when Summer and Colby were on the stand. But would that be possible that maybe, and this is a question for Sky, but would it be possible that maybe they showed her some of these photos over that lunch to get her ready for what was going to be on the big screen?
I would hope that they had shared Discovery with her far sooner than the lunch before these photographs were coming in. The defense has had these for probably a significant period of time. In fact, they probably sat down with the prosecution and went through, what photographs are we going to use? Which ones would be objectionable? What does enough to convey what we're trying to convey without it being overly prejudicial or overly gruesome? I mean, those conversations are had between defense counsel and the state all the time in these types of cases. And sometimes you can agree on which ones you're going to use, and sometimes you have to, argue about it. But I can't imagine in any case, let alone a murder trial, where I'm not forcing my client to look at it whether they want to or not.
Thanks for that, because that was the one thing that I'd heard, was that maybe she had not seen them. But still, somebody mentions Diane Downs. So my contact in prison that I did my Glimpse at Life series on was actually her cellmate, Diane Downs, for several years. Just saw that randomly.
Say that one more time. No, it's right here. Lori is dead in the eyes. Reminds me of Diane Downs, low life, pure evil. I was going to ask Robin about that, but what were you saying, Gigi?
I actually know someone who is in the California prison system and was her cellmate for several years. She murdered her daughter, and then she had 2 other children that she tried to murder. And according to the girl I know who's in prison for life for murder, she's a super, of course, says that she's a very nice lady. But I mean, you can't do that and be a nice person. But I just saw the name and I'm like, this girl that I know, that I've known since I was a kid, Diane Downs was her cellmate for a while.
Wow. Interesting. It is a small world, as Robin Dreek said. Robin, I was going to ask you, is she the personification of pure evil? Followed by this comment here, Lori is starting to look demonic. Maybe there's something to that zombie thing in her mind, and she's making herself one. But yeah, I mean, does evil have a look, I guess? I mean, people say she's dead in the eyes. Is there something to be seen here?
Well, dead in the eyes is the real descriptor right there, because when you don't have empathy, when you can't identify with the people around you, that looks dead in the eyes. That's a predator. It's when you look at a wolf, you look at, a great white shark, it just is literally dead in the eyes because there's nothing in there. They adapt to their situation and they move forward with that information you're providing them so they can prevail over you. It's interesting. And Sky, I liked your take on her in prison, because I had the same one at the very beginning of when she was convicted, because people were saying, because she killed her children, people in prison generally are really not regarded well in that prison system hierarchy because she took out her children. But I'm with you. She's charismatic, she's psychopathic, and she doesn't believe she killed her children. That combination, I think, she's going to have followers. That, again, total hypothesis, who knows, but it's hard to imagine her not having a following in prison, because she's done it her entire life. She's won people over her entire life. It follows that arc. No matter where she is, no matter what situation she's in, she has people like her. I don't know why this would be any different.
Follow the arc. Not the money, but the arc. Pam Hart Young. I think Robin is spot on. Great guess. Glad the other one couldn't make it. The other guest is Lance Leising. That's the Wally Pipp story. Do you guys know the Wally Pipp story? He was a first baseman for the New York Yankees until he was sick one day and Lou Gehrig took over. And you know the rest of the story. So now Robin Dreek is the Lou Gehrig of STS here. Moving on here, Bobby Henson. Sky Fentanyl Chick is lucky to have you. The good comments. I'm sure she loves her being called Fentanyl Chick. Sure she loves that. Gigi, back to you.
Took me 1 second. Sorry, that's really bad.
We'll start to wrap it up. I think we're all getting a little crazy, but I wanted to get back here to April Raymond. She continued this conversation with News Nation saying, I think these are just the circumstances I'm privy to. I don't know everything that had been going on in her life. I just think the combination of all three was extremely toxic. And she said that in 2019, Lori started to get apply the pressure more. She said she kind of applied the pressure a little bit more and was really a lot more aggressive with her beliefs and trying to persuade me. And it just wasn't something that made any sense to me. She looked different. She was speaking differently. She was associating with people that she'd never really been associating with before. And it just wasn't the same person that I had known. I mean, this is 2019. Again, I know we're kind of harping on it, but is there anything in, you know this case better than anyone, just going back to 2019, that would have, I don't know, triggered this change in her suddenly?
October of 2018 when she met Chad, because it was really once they started communicating, which was they exchanged numbers when they were leaving that day. It was just downhill after that. Lori very quickly is leaving Charles out of the blue after what seemed like a pretty decent marriage. And I really just think that that's what started it. It wasn't 2019. She was just surrounded by people that were enabling her beliefs. And Robin touched on this earlier. Nobody was holding her accountable, and including her own family. And look, I sympathize with Summer so much because you would probably defend your sister too. Hindsight's 2020, like Robin said earlier. But nobody was stopping her or saying, "Hey, what's up?" They wouldn't even open Charles's emails or answer his calls. So, I mean, I think that's really how it progressed. In 2019, she was in the throes of these beliefs. I mean, that's when, if you look, they met at the end of October 2018. A year later, less than a year later, 4 people are dead. Attempt on Brandon, so he could have been 5. Then you have the other 3 kids in less than a year. You see how fast that progressed from everybody that knew Lori saying, well, she seemed like a good mom. And then a year later, they're like, what just happened? So I think that when she got to April, that was when she left Charles for those over a month. And her and Tylee showed up and stayed with April overnight. And then Lori ended up and took Tylee to a hotel. But she had told April, you have to leave your 2 kids. You've served your purpose with them. And they were 10 and 12. So it was clear it was a no kids club. And it was also bizarre that April just wasn't comfortable. And so, yeah, I mean, but you look how quickly, because I think that was maybe February. When did she leave? She was really trying to avoid Charles having her served with divorce papers is the thought. She was jumping all around so she couldn't get served because she wanted that money. So I think her and Tylee, maybe it was February, I believe, that they went to. So it was quick. But that meeting with Chad, that was it. She found her spiritual equal. And I think from there, it was just pumping gasoline onto a raging fire.
The fun comments are coming in. Raul Thomas, Chad just wanted to work on his tan, grow out his hair, and improve his abs. Now look at him. Imagine Chad with a ripped
a
abs.
long time to do 2 of those.
It was such a midlife crisis. I mean, he's wearing skinny jeans, that 20-year-olds wear to the club. And it's just no, but I mean, you look at the pictures before, he's in khakis pulled halfway up his chest and a plaid shirt tucked in with a buzz cut. And then he gets a glow up from Lori. It's just, I mean, it's midlife crisis to the max with both of them. Lori just became a grandmother too. I think that hit her hard.
he was the drug that she was craving her entire life.
Yep.
That's why it spiked up like that. You know, she was so needy of someone to idolize her as a goddess.
Yep.
And he came in with his load of garbage, and she's like, I found my guy. And whoop. And the way to make this happen is because I can't work. I'm incompetent. He's incompetent. Can't sell any of his books. We need to kill people.
Right. Yeah. He made $2,000 a year. You know, big baller.
It was like a dopamine hit.
Yeah.
Pam Hart Young, look at this, Robin. You're now in competition with Gigi. Robin is a definite callback, great guest, followed by Jersey Jen.
No, there's no competition in true crime. We all bring something different.
Please have Robin back. And look at this. It's getting even. Look at these comments now. Robin equals loin fire with a on that
Bobby
note,
went there.
We'll start to wrap it up. No mention of Storm yet. Sky Lazaro.
Don't get me started. I could go all night on the Storm joke, y'all.
Sky Lazaro is an experienced corporate and criminal defense attorney. She has handled all kinds of cases: drug crimes, property crimes, DUI, white collar crimes, and she is currently representing that fentanyl chick, otherwise known as Corey Richins, the Utah mom accused of poisoning her husband, and then writing a children's grief book. The gag order in Salt Lake is in full effect, so I don't think we're going to hear anything from Sky. But as soon as she wants to talk about Corey, she knows that she's got to come on my show first, and she's already told me that. Already signed the contract, all of that. She hasn't.
I want to be here for that one too. That's a fascinating case, and you can't call her fentanyl mom yet.
Yeah,
you fentanyl mom.
Robin, you and I will discuss that case since Sky can't until she can. But Sky, bottom line here is Chad Daybell. Is he going to? Are they going to try to bring the death penalty? And will he try to plea out? Do you think, to avoid the ultimate punishment?
If I'm the state and he doesn't take a plea, I probably take it off the table. Just for the sake of what happens on appeal with death penalty cases versus just a conviction of murder. If he's convicted, he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, regardless. But you know, that's a conversation they would also have to have with the family, and see if that's something they would support or not. And maybe the state's just feeling really good after this conviction with Lori that they're going to just swing for the fence on all of it. So, you know, convicting someone to death is a much different deal. I think the conviction part remains very similar when you talk about the guilty versus not guilty. But when you move into the death penalty portion of these cases, they become a far different animal, and you know, juries, I think, you know, you probably got a better chance in Idaho than other places, but, you know, juries sometimes struggle with that. So, you know, I don't know if that's something that the state wants to take on. You know, like I said earlier, if I'm his attorney, I'm trying to get some sort of life without parole deal to be done with it. So it's hard to say. He may think he can just blame Lori at this point and it'll be fine. I don't know, and not take a deal at all.
For some reason, this is an answer I can't seem to get to the bottom of, Gigi. I'm sure you know, even though you're not an attorney. Arizona can charge death penalty. Barb is saying, I've heard the contrary because they're just conspiracy charges. Gigi, do you have an answer on this?
It's not a death penalty case for the conspiracy in Arizona. It's life in prison. So it's not an option. You know, I mean, it's essentially the death penalty. She'll never be free again. And I don't think Chad will either. So, but I agree with Sky. It's scary with the death penalty case on how those can be overturned on appeal. And there's a lot of scrutiny. And so I wasn't super upset when they took it off for Lori, because honestly, the chances of either one of them being put to death in Idaho are slim to none. And there's just so much chance for other things to go wrong, trial related. Tuck them away, let them go down to the pits of, you know, wherever they go in the prison, and then we don't hear from them. You know, like Jodi Arias, she was in the news all day, every day. The I think it was yesterday, the day before was like the anniversary of Travis's death. And I thought, wow, we haven't heard from her in so long because she loved to talk to the media. But it's going to be the same for Lori and Chad. Once they're convicted, they just fade away and bye-bye. And we see a documentary come out, every few years or something. But I don't know. I'm with Sky on it. They got their conviction. She's never going to be free. That is, as bad to me as death. I would curl up in a corner and fail to thrive if I were in prison. So, and I think Lori will be that way too.
Robin Dreek, he is a best-selling author, professional speaker, trainer, executive coach, podcast host, Marine Corps officer, retired FBI special agent, and chief of the Counterintelligence Behavior Analysis Program. Recruiting spies is one of his jobs. He is the author of The Code of Trust. It's Not All About Me. Tell the audience once again, Robin, where they can find you on YouTube and your website, and then I'll have you respond to this comment.
Yeah, sure. Peopleformula.com is my website, all one word, peopleformula.com. And my YouTube channel is Ardreek. It's easy to at Ardreek. And it's Forged by Trust is the podcast name. So thanks.
Check it out, everyone. Christy Linder, Robin, I'm wondering if Chad is also a psychopath. He doesn't have a history like Lori or signs of it, but how could he do this? And does he care about his kids at all? What's your take here?
Really great question. And in all honesty, I don't know yet. It's one of those things that we had a lot of exposure to Lori over the last bunch of months, years. And with Chad, he's different than she is. The arc, when I keep talking about these arcs and patterns, there's not a lot of data points I've seen on Chad's arc yet. I've seen a few because of her, not separated from her. So I'd have to take a deeper look at that. And we will as time progresses on this. But to say he's a psychopath, first of all, only clinicians can do that after they take the test. All my clinician friends always harp on me to make sure I don't ever claim that. But it'll be interesting to see. And whether he cares about his kids or not, man, boy, it's you got a hard argument there, don't you? Don't know on that one. I think that's what's the coming episodes are going to really take a deeper look at, ain't it?
Well, you remember right after Tammy Daybell was murdered, two of his kids were worried because he kind of ghosted them. And one of the sons was like, I don't want to lose my dad too. So there must have been some separation there right after the mom's murder, after Tammy Daybell's murder, that concerned at least two of the kids. It was the family friend that testified that the two children were worried about that. So, but I think the thing that I always try to remind people about Chad's kids, when they gave that interview, none of the documents had been released from Chandler or Gilbert. And the way it was explained on the stand was asphyxiation, which was the autopsy was negative. There was no physical reason they could see. So the only thing they can say is she stopped breathing, and put all the puzzle pieces together. It looks like it was a murder. You can see how his kids, without those documents being released and hearing, well, we couldn't find anything, she just stopped breathing, maybe they supported. I've heard one or two, maybe not so much anymore. But I think after the trial, if there are any of his kids still saying he's framed, then that's very unfortunate, because I think it was more than proven he wanted Tammy out of the way.
Yeah.
And some of his kids still live in that house with their children. And so I would think that, I don't know of anybody who would want that property, but
I think you had a mutual addiction going on there. We just talked about how Lori had this spike when she met him too, when he met her, because she was giving him the attention where he went from the chinos to the skinny jeans. So he'd been an aspiring somebody his whole life, and she made him feel that way. So all of a sudden his endorphins and dopamine are flowing hard in the brain, making him do stupid. To what extent each of us has a regulator on that, that's the difference in all of us. And also when you're surrounded by people, again, it goes back to all these patterns of behavior with the people we surround ourselves with. And I tend to think, from what we've seen, he has more empathy than she does, but how much, that's the question.
Yeah, I think it was a sex thing with Chad. I think she did things he's never experienced, and that got him hooked like a fish. And he just kind of went with the line. But I really do think that was his. Oh God, I can make so many puns. I won't. I'll just say that was what got Chad in this situation right here.
From really chinos to skinny jeans, the Chad Daybell story. What a great title.
There you go.
Gigi McKelvey, what else can we say about her? She's host of the popular true crime podcast, Pretty Lies and Alibis. The Alibiers were in here in big numbers today. I appreciate that. She spent 6 weeks in Boise covering the Lori Vallow trial. Before that, she covered the Alec Murdaugh trial. She also does stuff for Law Crime NewsNation. She has over 50 podcasts on this story at Pretty Lies and Alibis, so check it out. Final question to you, Gigi, from Idaho Spud Girl. Question anyone willing to answer. Do you think Chad's children finally see their dad as a murderer?
I mean, I think that at this point, if they don't say it out loud, they have to be thinking it in their head. You can't look through, even just a news story online about this case without seeing these text messages. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, though. It's hard because you were raised by this person. And I mean, we don't know how they were raised. So I don't know. I've heard a couple don't, but maybe some still do. I don't know. They think he was framed. The kids are in his backyard. So there you go.
It's ripping apart that identity again.
Robin, have you ever gotten this in your life before? I'm curious. Be honest here. Robin reminds me of David Bowie.
He does. I know.
Thanks. That's good. As I'm getting older, earlier in life, it was Kevin Bacon's for a while, and then it was Tom Cruise a bit. But then younger me, and when at a distance.
Yeah, you got the Bowie vibes going on.
That's really interesting.
Pam Young is your biggest fan, by the way. Keep Robin as a regular. The man is outstanding. Pam, I'm gonna do it. Gigi rocks. I just saw one that I skipped by. By the way, KCL says 6 weeks of trials. I think someone said 16 at one point. June says, love the guest tonight. Quick programming note. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern time, Google Greg McCrary. He's a legend in the FBI. He's written books on the psychology of killers. He's going to be on here to talk about what in the heck is going on in Portland, Oregon, with these 6 women found dead over a short span of time, all under the age of 40. Joining him is Jim Van Allen, a former Canadian criminal profiler, and the other guy well, Detective Sergeant Chris Anderson from the First 48 in Birmingham. Those 3 gentlemen will be on the show tomorrow night to talk about what's going on in Portland, Oregon. Until then, love you, America. Love you, Salt Lake. Love you, Virginia, which is, I think, where Robin is. And love you, South Carolina, and everywhere in between. Until next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Hang on one
second.
second.